Viewers, you are welcome to our program, Nigeria Decides 2023, Issues and Voices. This is a program brought to you by the National Working Group on Peace Building and Governance with support from the United States Institute of Peace. Throughout these elections, we have had successive panels that had reviewed, debated, and projected the dynamics of the elections. And today, we have reached a point where we can make a general assessment of the elections. The key purpose of this program, in line with the objectives of the National Working Group on Peace Building and Governance, is to ensure that the elections are peaceful and that the outcome actually represents the wishes and desires of the Nigerian people. We have an interesting panel today to do a general assessment and to map out the way forward after the elections. We have Ahmed Jumare, who is from the NIM Foundation. NIM Foundation works on peace and conflict issues, especially in the Northeast, but also in other parts of the country. Secondly, we have Dr. Olajumoke Jenwo, who is a peace and conflict specialist with a particular focus on gender. Finally, we have Dr. Chris Kwaja, who is a member of the National Working Group on Peace Building and Governance, and has been part of this work on Nigeria Decides 2023. You are all welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Ahmed, let's start with you. What's your general assessment of the elections? Did it go well? Did Nigerians get what they wanted?
Thank you very much for asking that question. I think, of course, depending on who you speak to, there are a lot of debates that have happened across the civil society space, as well as also, to a large extent, the international development space about the general prognosis of the elections. What we do know for a fact is that there were several issues that particularly relating to the process itself. For instance, some of the concerns we've heard from our communities across the areas that we served is that there were issues as it relates to transmission of the election results from the polling unit. We've also heard significant levels of issues that happen as it relates to ballot box snatching, as well as also political thuggery that has been driven largely, and I say unfortunately, by some political leaders. Generally, what we see is that during the election process, we did see a lot of enthusiasm by both young people as well as women that initially did not find their space in the political arena within the country, being more willing to engage actively in this space. What we have found now, unfortunately, is that because of some of these issues I have mentioned, there are opportunities for us to begin to really heal the nation, but also reflect on these issues that we've had during the elections. One of the issues I think that should be paramount in addressing is issues of justice post-election. For instance, individuals that have participated in electoral malpractice need to be prosecuted. I think that should be a first step. There also needs to be a whole of society assessment on where we should go forward from here. That is our own general sense of the elections and some of the areas that we should look at in these days.
Thank you, Ahmed. Dr. Olajumoke Jenwo, what's your own general assessment of the elections?
Thank you very much, sir. Actually, I will look at it from the issue of violence. During the election, if we look at the reports we got from the international observers and the data is available, we can deduct that the polling units where we had issues of violence is somehow insignificant to the places where we didn't have violence. And so for me, based on that, I would want to conclude that it's a bit fair and credible. Yeah.
But there are lots of reports about violence in the elections. Why do you think it was insignificant?
If we compare the statistics, the statistics of the polling units where we had violence, it's actually insignificant to the polling units where we did not have violence.
So we should be proud of ourselves.
Yes, we are moving forward. And the issue of the IREF, uploading of results, there were a lot of issues because Nigerians had a lot of hope, and we actually felt that this is going to be, the best of it all. But somehow, the promises, the issues of IREF, because we expected that they should have the mistakes INEC had during the Osun gubernatorial election, they should have corrected it, and we expected, just like the INEC chairman promised, that it will be corrected and it will be repeated during the presidential election. Unfortunately, there were issues, but my take is still that it's still a work in progress. There's no institution all over the world that is perfect. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Chris Kwaja, what's your own assessment?
I think my assessment of the 2023 elections will be hinged on certain indicators that set the parameters for the conduct of the elections. The first was the commitment of the president to ensure he allows INEC the free hand to conduct an election without any form of executive interference. And he was very consistent in saying all that INEC needed, I gave them. And INEC confirmed that through the INEC chair to say all that we needed, we were given. The second point is about the role of the security agencies. We saw some level of professionalism displayed by the security agencies. This whole concept or notion of the militarization of the public space in the run-up to the elections was not mentioned at all this time, unlike in 2019 and other elections in the past, where one of the defining feature of election security is or was the militarization of the civic space. We did not see that, and I think for me that's quite commendable. The third indicator was the enthusiasm demonstrated by Nigerian youths in effecting a change for the better. They saw their future in that election. Unfortunately, we saw again that the 2023 elections witnessed the lowest voter turnout in the history of elections from 1999 to date, which was quite worrisome. And two issues were quite clear. One, the issue of voter apathy that was defined in the context of citizens feeling that they had unmet demands around governance, issues around security, which was general in the country. We also had the issue of voter suppression, as we see with violence in Lagos and other states, where the issue was not about citizens not wanting to vote, but that they wanted to vote, but were denied that opportunity to vote. Now, these three major indicators defined the way the elections went. And I need to add the last one, the Naira crisis, the conflict between the Central Bank of Nigeria, the Nigerian governors, and the Nigerian people over the availability of Naira. You want to stop the politicians from monetizing the electoral process, but it had huge implications for the livelihood of the average Nigerian in terms of access to cash. And that on its own was a major issue with the election, because many people were sleeping at the ATM centers or at the banks trying to get money while you are expecting them to come out and vote. And this was something that we did not really do well. Now, all this had huge implications for the success or otherwise of the election. Now, one other indicator that ties all this together was the heated political environment, where the politicians all were competing in the mobilization and instrumentalization of identity, religion, ethnicity, region. These three became the key definers of peace or violence or conflict or insecurity in the run-up to the elections. Now we're in the post-conflict phase. We're in the post-election phase. We're seeing people dissatisfied with the outcome of the elections. They're in court. We're seeing the president-elect or governors-elect or whoever was elected all saying we need to come together. Recently, the president-elect was very clear in saying, I've listened to you Nigerians. You're talking about inclusion. I'm going to put up a government of national competence rather than national government of national unity. And I think that's on its own, it's a testament to the fact that people are looking at how well to begin to put the building blocks for governance in a post-election phase in the country.
Thank you. Ahmed, before the elections, there are lots of fears that the bandits, terrorists in places like Zamfara will stop the elections, but finally we didn't hear much about that.
Yes, I think that is definitely correct. There were a lot of concerns that we saw, particularly emanating from parts of the northwest, northeast, including the north central, as well as the southeast, of course, with the secessionist movement that has really continued to plague that region for quite some time. One of the, I think, driving factors, I would say, for managing some of the challenges in those areas is particularly attributed to a lot of efforts that were done by groups such as the National Peace Working Committee, as well as also civil society organizations and other international agencies that are involved in this space. For instance, some of the efforts we've seen in the months leading up to the elections is that there were tens, if not hundreds, of peace meetings that were convened across the different states in Nigeria. I think that helped because we were able to, we as a group, were able to bring together different actors within that space to really discuss what does it mean if we do have issues during or after the elections. Another positive thing that happened, I think Chris mentioned this as well, is the general sense in which the executive engaged with the political issue. There was a lot of support for really shunning away from practices we saw in 2015 and 2019 and possibly subsequent other elections that have happened. We saw the signing of the peace accord. I think that in itself provided the first step of binding some of these political leaders to ensure that even when there are issues that are being contested, there are certain practices that could lead to violence that they shun away from. Another positive sign really that we saw in the months leading up to the elections is that there was a lot of there was a general sense across all the different areas we work in on a new Nigeria. Everyone wanted to see a different country, regardless of who comes into power. So that in itself really helped motivate some of these some of these issues of conflict we've seen. Finally, one of the, of course, concerns we had moving into the election was that there was a lot of incidents reported as it relates to attacks in the northwest as well as parts of the northeast. I would say a lot of members in the civil society organizations really thought that that would translate directly into areas not being able to have elections. But the positive thing we saw was that really the government was able to come in through the security agencies to manage some of these issues before even the elections were held.
Thank you. Dr. Jango, one of the key issues in this election was ethnic profiling and violence aimed at voter suppression. The problem with ethnic profiling is that it creates deep pain and hurt in the society. Some people feel they were denied their citizenship rights to go and vote because of their ethnicity or what they stood for. What's your assessment of that, of what that means in terms of rebuilding governance in our society?
Yeah, ethnicity, religious sentiment, all these are things that has really, it has really deepened into, it's really deepened into Nigerians' democracy. And for me, I think this 2023 general election, I think we're really, we're taking a positive step in the sense that from my own assessment, I can see that people don't even care who comes in. They don't even want to associate themselves, because we see somebody like Obi even having, I think in Nasarawa, you won there, in Lagos. You know, these are places that you won't even expect that he will. But so I can understand that, you know, this awakening consciousness and this, people are becoming more enlightened that ethnicity is not the way to go. Ethnic profiling is not the way to go. Religious sentiments should be put aside. People are ready to do anything just to get a change of government. So,
thank you. Dr. Kwaja, on the ICT was one of the big talking points of the elections. And maybe there are two components. There's the use of BVAS as the integrity test for the elections, that if you are not being identified by BVAS, you don't vote. And secondly, there was IREV, which is reporting the votes cast in a polling unit directly to a public portal where people could see. What's your assessment of how those two elements of ICT worked, and what's the impact that they have on the process going forward?
I think one of the central logic of ICT is that it does not solve a problem, but it is an enabler for you to solve a problem. On its own, it cannot act. You need humans to propel it to act. Now, that catalytic effect of having people to get it to work in enabling or solve a problem, of improving the integrity of our elections, became the major challenge with the elections. Now, the quality of trainings given to the ad hoc staff, the kind of ad hoc staff recruited to come and use this BVAS, the relationship between the BVAS and the IREV in terms of the transmission of these results, the extent to which those who have the responsibility of ensuring this transmission takes place are able to discharge these responsibilities. All this constitutes the environment within which beavers and IREV should work. Now, what's our definition of that environment? It's an environment that is highly politicized. It's an environment where all these facilities, in the words of INEC, were also threatened in terms of hackers, and we got the message that even the Minister of Digital Economy say that the servers were attacked severally. Now that's one example. Two, you also have to deal with an environment that is defined by huge inflow of money with the goal of undermining the process. And through the infusion of money, we see the integrity and the credibility of the process undermined by certain individuals that were recruited to discharge that responsibility. Sokoto is one good example where an entire election or elections both for the governorship and the House of Assembly, National Assembly were declared inconclusive. And we also saw the decision taken by INEC to suspend the REC in Sokoto, which is a pointer to the fact that things went wrong because individuals saddled with the responsibility of using these facilities to give us credible elections were part and parcel of the process of undermining it. And that is why we had this huge logistics challenge around the use of the beavers, the use of the IRF in giving us an elections that will reflect the will and the wishes of Nigeria. And I think this is a very important lesson for us to learn going forward. And some of the off-cycle elections that will take place should be opportunities for us to really right whatever wrong that we have seen. But to some extent, you are also dealing with a situation whereby people use their own hard-earned resources to present themselves for elections, campaigns, pay for their nomination forms and everything. You shift these elections. Who bears the cost? So we need to begin to look at how issues of accountability and redress for people that I see as victims of electoral fraud need to be dealt with, because whoever is involved in this election that was shifted is counting his own or her own loss. But the system is not sensitive to how to address this loss incurred by these individuals. And that is why election becomes a do or die issue, or where they win, the first thing they want to do is to recoup based on the loss encountered, because there was nothing done to really address many of these unfortunate situations that they passed through.
Okay, my final question on the elections, let me ask you, Ahmed, in some of the states, Lagos, on the 25th February elections, Labour Party had a clear lead. Katsina, Nasarawa. Then, subsequently in the March elections, some of those leads were reversed. And many people are asking questions, what happened? What do you think happened?
I think my own perspective on this is that there are clearly issues that need to be addressed by the judicial system in Nigeria. Like you rightly said, there are a lot of inconsistencies that were seen, I believe not just in Lagos, but across various states and specific polling units in the country. We have seen, of course, instances where factually people have presented the results from the polling unit with a mismatch from what is on the IRF portal. So I think these are all issues that hopefully the judicial system in Nigeria will address in the coming weeks and months. We certainly hope they do, because of course with the heightened tension across the country, our own perspective is that this would be significant in ensuring a violent-free Nigeria moving forward. One of the challenges our communities have mentioned to us, for instance, is, especially the elders within the community say to us is, look, the reason why a lot of young people came out is because they have restored faith in the system, in the process. A lot of women as well came out to support candidates, but what we're seeing is that, of course, because that faith they had in the process may not have really concluded as they had hoped. This could then create a wider pool for extremist groups, bandits, successionist movements to recruit young people that are angry. As you know, groups such as Boko Haram and ISWAP, one of the central messages they push out is democracy doesn't work for our society. So come to us and we'll incorporate you into our own system. So if we don't, of course, address this system and ensure that people get the justice they deserve in a transparent way, it could widen the purview as well as the vulnerability pool of young people that could join these groups. Certainly the Southeast is another challenge. Even before the elections, we've seen really agitations to release Nnamdi Kanu. We've seen agitations by the successionist movement. A lot of the young people within those groups had restored hope in the Nigerian entity because they felt the system could present a legitimate pathway to realizing their political gains. Now, if we don't really in the coming months address some of these concerns by especially youth that are angry, we could stand the risk of having a critical mass pivoting to joining, like I said, groups that seek to use a more violent means to realize their political gains. Finally, just to add, within these whole challenges, there is light at the end of the tunnel. We have seen for the first time in Nigeria where a significant number of governors lost their senatorial seats. We've seen members of House of Representatives that have really changed across various areas in Nigeria, particularly in parts of the Southeast and Northwest. So these are all positive signs we're seeing. Finally, the area that we need to work on is female participation. Recently, I think the World Economic Forum put out a report, a gender gap report that highlighted, placed Nigeria on 139th, I believe, out of an assessment that was done on about 146 countries in terms of a gender gap. This means that one of the factors that I highlighted, of course, was political participation. This means that as a society, we need to do a lot more to really encourage women to come out, but also participate in political process.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We are taking a short break, and we'll be right back. And when we come back, we'll focus on the governance challenges that Nigeria faces after the elections. We'll be right back.
documenting the Nigerian story.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our program, Nigeria Decides 2023, where we are making a general assessment of the elections that have been almost completely concluded, but we are also looking forward to the governance challenges facing the incoming governments. Dr. Olajumoke, let's start with you. The elections are almost all over, 15th April. I think some of the remaining elections would be concluded, but for the most part, we know the winners of these elections. What are the key governance challenges that they will be facing as they take over power on 29th May?
Yeah, thank you very much. One of the key governance issues is going to be facing is this issues of accountability, because I've had a lot of Nigerians waiting to see what the incoming president is going to do, especially with people that, you know, they've actually seen as maybe somebody like the CBN governor. We expect him to hold him to ransom to tell us what actually happened. You know, that's a big issue. And the hope of Nigerians is really high now. We want the system to move. There are no jobs. Poverty is everywhere. Women are suffering. In fact, poverty has been, it is now feminized. You know, when you see poverty, it's like you see the face of a woman. You know, and to say the worst is that there's this dwindling participation of women in politics. Looking at the representation of women in this last concluded 2023 election, we can see that there's a decrease in the number of women that are in politics before and the number of women that are participating now. So it's really a big issue. Infrastructures are not working. You know, people don't have jobs. People don't have jobs, and it's really a big issue. So I think the shoe is actually so big for the president coming in, and I don't know.
And the governance too.
And the governance, it's a big one.
Yeah. Dr. Kwaja, are there other governance challenges that you think need to be highlighted at this point?
Yeah, I think the most important governance challenge I see, it's not about building physical roads and physical bridges or housing. It's about rebuilding trust. It's about inclusion. It's about peace building. It's about breaking down, deconstructing that image of hate that defined the election. And where you are able to do that, and people see themselves as one indivisible people that are living together as brothers and sisters. And back to the last stanza of our national anthem. And I think if the president, the governors, members of the National Assembly, members of the State House of Assembly focus on building a country where peace, unity, peace, and justice shall reign, then you'll be able to do every other thing that you imagine. And I think for me, that is the governance challenge that our leaders and the people of Nigeria should focus on.
Ahmed, the first challenge Dr. Olajumoke raised was that of accountability. And yet, this is a sector where everybody thought General Muhammadu Buhari, given his anti-corruption credentials, would do very well. But everybody is saying today that Nigeria is even more corrupt than before he came into power. Do you think really the incoming government will be able to finally address this issue of corruption?
Yes, firstly, I must admit that the challenges, the scope of the corruption in Nigeria is at a scale that is unimaginable to a lot of people that visit Nigeria. I think just a few days ago we had a partner coming from one of the international development agencies that really spoke about his experience coming into Nigeria. His first point of encounter to corruption was at the airport. So these are, I mean, really significant challenges that are entrenched within the heart of our society. But I think a government that is truly sincere, that comes in, like Chris said, with the willingness to really want to build that trust across society, I think we'll have really a more successful path to addressing the issues of corruption. One of the things that I think that is often missed out when really looking at issues of building trust and addressing corruption is the role the traditional institutions and the religious leaders play. I think they have a pivotal role to play in this next journey. As you know, Nigeria is a highly religious society. Most people identify with one religious group or the other. But the question is, what then allows us to continue embarking on this path of really destruction? Because the scale at which we see this corruption, especially involving government institutions in collaboration with the private sector, is becoming too rampant. That is not sustainable for Nigeria. The main challenge is we no longer have the money, the river flowing from the oil fields in Nigeria. There's a lot of competition. Other African countries are exporting as well, so we can no longer rely on that. Our level of exports are significantly low, so we need to improve on that. But one advice that we always tell people in position of leadership is human capacity. It's very important when addressing these sort of issues. Make sure you match human capacity with integrity. Once we have these two things in position of leadership, I think we'll go a long way in addressing corruption. It will not happen today, I believe, or the next election cycle, but we can get very far if we get a sincere commitment from the next government to come.
So we are praying for sincere commitment. Dr. Jengo, security is one of the challenges that has been highlighted. There's been a lot of violence over recent years in this country, agitation, kidnapping, secessionist movements, jihadist movements. The security agencies are bogged down trying to address all these issues all at the same time. Moving forward, how do you think the incoming government should best address the challenges around insecurity?
Insecurity has been a big issue in Nigeria now, and it has directly and indirectly affected every other sector, way of life, and all that. But my take is that the incoming government needs to have the political will. For me, that's the first thing. If they don't have the political will to do these things, they won't do anything. Because the present government, we've seen reports and we've seen things on social media and all where they will say they've picked up so person, they've been able to arrest a number of people, and we don't even hear what happens. We don't know anything about it. It just goes down. It goes down. So they need to have that political will and ready to have security. If they are ready to do it, then they will. Because you should be able to bring to justice who you found wanting. You should be able to, if you get hold of kidnappers, you should be able to do something to them that the public will see that this is what you've been able to do. And they should be able to talk to us. They don't talk, they lack communication. We should know what is happening. And there's a need to reform the security sector. It's a big issue because I don't know how true it is, but we've had issues where we see cases where they will say they've recruited maybe one of the former secessionists, they recruit them back into the security sector. I don't think that is the way to go. There's a need for a total reform of the security sector. They need to have a direction. They need to have a focus, and they need to have a synergy, because you can't do this alone. One security sector cannot do it. It's not about rivalry. You have to have synergy, a coordinated, calculated effort to be able to do these things. So,
but do you think the security agencies are, one, capable, two, ready to address these security challenges?
yes. They are.
What's your evidence?
Yeah, because, well, I might not be able to say some of the things I know, but I know they are. And that's the reason why I talked about political will. That's the reason why I emphasized on political, and I'm still emphasizing it. Political will is key to solve the security challenges in Nigeria.
Political will, that's at the level of the government,
Yes, sir.
rather than at the level of the security agencies themselves.
Both.
Okay, both need.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Chris Kwaja, you emphasize the question of trust. Trust takes time to build, and I think a lot of Nigerians feel disappointed by some of the challenges posed by this election. Help us show the pathway towards this construction of trust in the Nigerian system.
For every society that is celebrating durable peace today, they took a deliberate decision to craft a pathway for peace, and trust was very central to that. It is difficult to put a timeline because you are dealing with human beings, and you must recognize that dynamism in human interaction, because sometimes the wounds are so deep that you need to really take a lot of energy and patience to deal with it. The first pathway to trust building for us is the body language of the leader. Once the body language of the leader is focused on providing a leadership that serves all, not any religious group, not any regional group, not any political group, not any ethnic group, every other person that walks behind the leader will take a cue from that. And most times, when you begin to see a slide in governance where mistrust sets in, the body language of the leader is the first indicator for that. So I think that is the first way to go. Secondly, beyond the body language is the willpower to act on the basis of what you say. No double speaking. If the leader is saying this is wrong, this is the direction we should go, then he should be able to act it. Where, for instance, you have a leader saying, I want to fight corruption, but the same leader is armstrong because individuals who might have supported him in the process of getting access to power are involved in graft, and he is not able to act in dealing with them, then you create a huge climate of mistrust on yourself. And this climate of mistrust you create on yourself permeates down to the community level. And that is what we see happen both in the security sector, where today, when you post a commissioner of police to a state, the first question is not about capability and competence. It's about which religious group, which ethnicity does he represent. He is coming from which region? Because people believe that if you send the commissioner of police that is not at the same or does not profess the same faith that I do, then he is not going to protect me. So that feeling of vulnerability creates the mistrust. So we need to deal with all that. And lastly, the state as the custodian of trust should be seen as a neutral mediator in the affairs of its citizens. And I'm using the word state now in terms of the embodiment of all the leadership that we see. So the Nigerian state must be one that is neutral, regardless of which region, regardless of which ethnicity, regardless of which religious group. The neutrality of the state must be seen, must be felt in the way it distributes allocatable resources across the region. Where you go to one region, you see 2,000 kilometers of road constructed, and another region is struggling with 100 kilometers of road. Or where one region have access to power, the other does not have. Or where you do a calculation of the amount of money that is being channeled for development, and that calculation is one that highlights regional imbalance, state imbalance, then the whole question of trust becomes very problematic. And I think for me, from the perspective of governance, that is what we want to see Nigeria deal with. And in dealing with that, you will have a country that works for all. And I think back to what Chinua Achebe said, the problem with Nigeria is a problem of leadership. And he went on to say, there was a country. And I think we must go back to that old country where Nigeria was serving Nigerians, not just some few individuals based on their vested interests.
Yeah, that's really about constructing a state as a neutral arbiter that's able to address the challenges Nigerians face. Jumare, when you look back at the leadership of Nigeria through the ages, right from Gawan through to General Buhari, remove President Shagari from the equation, we've been ruled by military who have fought a civil war for the national cohesion of this country. So in a sense, Tinubu is coming into power as the first outside that cycle of people who fought to the war to keep Nigeria one. Of course, Jonathan is another who wasn't part of that history. But coming in at this point, where there are lots of sentiments, emotions, concerns over election manipulation, what chances do you think he has of continuing that drive for national cohesion?
I think that's, and thank you very much for that question. I think that would be highly dependent on the administration's ability to really constitute a team that uses empathy to drive the way it engages with the society. One of the challenges I presume they will have is really the existing polarization we've seen along ethnic and religious lines. Largely that has been expanded as a result of the elections that were recently held. One of the things, for instance, we've seen now, certainly on social media for those that are active there, is that there's a complete divide along ethnic lines. There are religious leaders that have gone on social media to actively call for separation or inflame the already existing anger amongst youth. For them to really achieve a successful path to building cohesion, firstly, they have to really accept that there are genuine concerns by different groups across the country. They really have to come in strong to ensure that all individuals and groups that have been involved in electoral malpractice are prosecuted. And they have to really chart a pathway for a government of national unity. That should cut across the various regions, should cut across the various religious groups as well as ethnic groups in the country. Of course, this is very difficult in a country with over close to 300 ethnic groups. But I truly believe that, as I said, with sincerity of purpose, you will find that the path to social cohesion will not be difficult. Nigerians are very simple people. All they want is to live in peace. Most of us, and I speak for, I'm sure, the majority of Nigerians, do not want to wake up to live in, I think someone described it as living in mini prisons, where you have barbed wires all over your house and security guards. I think at the heart of it, truly all everyone wants in their own individuality is to have an opportunity to really go about their daily affairs with support of the government where necessary, without any major challenges. I think that's all we want. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Olajimoke. One of the challenges is inclusion, especially of women. What needs to happen to make sure women feel and become more included in the Nigerian system?
That's a very good question, sir. One of the first thing I want to highlight is the issue of political participation of women. If we noticed the last election, that's 2019 election, if you compare it to the statistics we have for the 2023 election, we see a dwindling number of participation of women in election. And for me, I think for that, I hold INEC accountable for that. The reason is because in our constitution, if you're to join a political party, you're supposed to submit your, what's it called? Is it manifesto? And in the manifesto and your constitution, of which a certain number of your executives should be women. I think 35% or so. As long as the political party does not meet that percentage, INEC should be able to hold it responsible. Because I've had one or two people talk about the price of tickets, the charge for the ticket for this and that. But the thing is, these political parties don't get anything from the government. So it's from this money they pay their bills, it's from this money they do all these things. But if INEC can emphasize that, or they can, hold sanction any political party that does not have this particular certain number of women in their constitution, in their executive constitution, I think it's really going to help. Because it's only if there are those women there in the decision making at the leadership level, that is when they can speak for other women. When you see issues of rally at the local level, you will see participation of women up to 90%. 90%. Whereas when you get to executive, you can hardly get even 1%. At the political level, you see them talking about women leader. Is that all we need? Of which even
but actually, that's what the constitutional laws say. It doesn't give a percentage of women in the ESCO. What it says is that in the National Executive Committee of each party, there must be at least one woman who is the woman leader, and there must be one youth who is the youth leader. That's all the regulation says.
Then I will want to call for a review of that, because we've signed policies, we've signed, what's it called? We have Nigeria ratified the United Council Resolution, Security Council Resolution 1325, which calls for inclusion of women to up to 35%. We have the gender policy too. So all these are what we signed to. So we should be able to reflect this in our institutions.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So when we have this, Because a lot of women we have quite a number of women that are doing great things, but they are not captured, either in the economic or in the political space. They are not even recognized. And it is when these things are being done, that is when, other women that are coming up, we see them as a role model. There needs to be like this mentorship. Even the media. You people can do a lot. You can reflect, talk about women, and even political aspirant that has won election, when they come to ask them questions about what they are doing about women. And we need to have this tool in which we can hold them accountable. Because this election, like when they were talking about their manifesto, you see a lot of them talking about they will include 50%, 40%, 35%, of which it has always happened in the past. They need to understand that women constitute almost half of the population. So making us redundant, it's not the way to go. If we actually want to see, progress in this country, we need to, get the women working. We need to recognize them. You need to include us in everything. Not having one woman in an executive is like tokenism. What would the woman say?
Absolutely. I think we are all agreed on that. Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the close of this Nigeria Decides 2023. And we've reviewed the elections, looked at the problems, but also focused on the hope for this country, the hope of improved governance. In terms of that, one of the issues that we just concluded on is that we have to end tokenism. You have to have governance that's very inclusive of women, of the youth, but also of all sections of this country. The crisis of the past few years have been linked to the fact that many Nigerians felt excluded from the system. Moving forward, this question of inclusivity is the key to reconstructing trust in the Nigerian state, so that the state becomes an edifice that serves the interests of all Nigerians. Dr. Chris Kwaja,
thank you.
Dr. Olajumoke, and Madam Jumare, thank you very much for your participation. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.